this shir. Our dear friend, memory of a dear friend Reuven Zalk, who passed away earlier today, and it coincides. Tonight's shir coincides with the onset of my grandmother's yahrzeit, Peril Basra Moshe Nosson, and it's our tefillah that the get together brings nachas ruach to her neshama. Survivor of the camps who, by dint of profound emunah and bitachon, he managed to live till nearly 100 and passed away here in Eretz Yisrael. So that's Reuven ben Beryl Halevi and Peril Basra Nosson Nosson. The topic that I would like to discuss is probably an example of what my mother, Aleh Shalom, used to say, is that every generation rediscovers its own truths and rediscovers the basic truths. I don't think that anything that I'm saying is in any way new, but for me it's a rediscovery, and so I'll share it with you. That there are basically three foundations that are discussed in creation, the foundations of humanity. And as we'll see, these foundations in humanity are being pushed against heavily in Western culture. Let's go through what those are. The first instruction that was given to man is about life. That means that he was, the framing of that is have children and don't kill anybody. But the message behind that is that life must be precious. That as a value means that if a person does something that violates the primacy of life, if you remind them of it, they should be able to say, oh, I didn't intend to jeopardize anybody's life, not mine, not anybody else's. So there is a principle called life. That principle, by the way, will later become the midah of Gemilut Chasadim. Looking after and building on life will become what we know as Gemilut Chasadim. But in its core, it is a celebration of and a preservation of an encouragement of life. That's the first. The second is that Adam le'amal yulad. A person was made to toil. The words that are used in the Torah are that he was placed in Gan Eden le'ovda u'leshomra. Le'ovda u'leshomra means to work. That industry later will become what we know as Torah. As Chazal tell us, Ashrei mi she'amolo b'Torah. Fortunate is the person whose toil is in Torah. That means that everybody has to toil. No matter what, everybody has to work hard and toil in whatever it is that is their chosen area of endeavor. Ashrei mi she'amolo b'Torah. But industry or amal, industry is indispensable. It is one of the pillars of humanity. And the third pillar is when Hashem said, Lo tov heyos ha'odam levado. What does that mean, that a person should not be levado? So Rashi explains that it means that we're not supposed to be in competition with Hashem. That's what levado means. He's levado up there, and I'm levado down here. So it's very nice. I'll let him be levado in Shamayim, but I'm going to be levado here. That is the levado is the idea of it being an independent being. And the opposite, which is what Hashem wanted in the Lo Tov, what he wanted, of course, by introducing a person to the idea of being married, is that a person should be a dependent being. A person is meant to be a dependent being. So we now have the three foundations. We have life, that's the mitzvah pru'ervu, and the prohibition against killing is a celebration of life. We have industry, which is amal, la'avda u'lishamra, that's to toil. And the ideal toil, of course, is Torah, and it will become Torah, but it doesn't matter what a person is doing. Whatever a person is toiling in, he must toil in that. A person is not supposed to be, it's not just not being lazy, it's not being active. And the third, which is dependency, that will later become what we know of as avoda. Avoda is when a person acknowledges his absolute submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he recognizes that he is not an independent being, he is a dependent being. So we have life, which will eventually become Gemilut Chasadim, industry, which will become Torah, and dependency, which will become Avoda. So we have Torah, Avoda, and Gemilut Chasadim, and the Perek tells us, the Mishnah in the beginning of Avos, tells us that these are the three things which give HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nachas Ruach. It gives a HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ratzon, and we are designed, the world was created so that we would bring that Nachas Ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through these three areas. So we have the fundamentals, and the nice news is that every person is supposed to know this. He doesn't need to be given the Torah for this. He doesn't need to be at Har Sinai for this. This is fundamental. This is what it means to be human. Now, when that's a big statement, to say that something is what it means to be human, everybody tries to say that statement. But the Torah says it using these three principles. This is what it means to be human. Now, I just want to point out, look at what happens when the Western world tries to relate to these. First of all, it's a little hard to talk about, but in the Western world, people pay money, in fact, billions and billions of dollars, to hear about or to watch people being killed. I know that that doesn't exist in your world, but in the world of the Western culture, they have absolutely no problem eating dinner after watching the 6 o'clock news. I've even heard that some people are able to eat dinner while they're watching the 6 o'clock news, which is really quite remarkable, because everything about a human being should recoil with the thought that somebody was being killed or harmed or injured in any way. And instead, there's an industry, hundreds and thousands of movies that are made, and the more people being killed, the better. That's because the world of Esav has directly taken aim at life. Life is not meant to be that much of a value, and I don't mean to belabor this point, but there's a great deal of discussion about the mortality rate associated with COVID-19. They're talking about it every day. They talk about it all the time. It doesn't even approach the number of people, Rahman al-Itzlan, who are killed every year in car accidents. And you do not see the entire world focusing all of their attention on making sure that people would not be killed in car accidents. They wouldn't even be willing to accept a restraint that every car has to be monitored by the computers so that it cannot possibly go too quickly, so that it cannot exceed the speed limit, so that it cannot come close to another car, so that it cannot weave in and out of traffic in frightening and endangering people. But they don't do that because they're not really interested in life. The reason why there's so much discussion about this virus is because it compromises people's sense of control. It does not because it compromises their sense of life. Life is always precious, and it is one of the things that defines us as a human being. If a person, you would say, what's the difference between a person and a lower being? The answer, first of all, is that he consciously cherishes life. Industry. Now, I don't know anything about what you were exposed to, but in America, believe it or not, there is a concept called retirement. It's an absurd, absolutely positively absurd concept. Imagine going over to a Talmud Chacham. Go over to a Talmud Chacham. Say, listen, you've, you learned for 40, 45 years. You're entitled to a gold watch. And let the young fellows learn. You don't need to learn. You don't need to learn. You can take it easy now. You can play golf. You can play shuffleboard. You don't need to keep on learning that. You did yours. You did yours wonderfully. So that idea that somebody could retire means that all of the years that he was working, were actually years spent trying to get to Batolo, trying to get to non-industry. Meaning, when you sleep, if a fellow sleeps at night in order to be able to learn in the morning, so he's credited with the sleep time is considered a contribution to learning Torah. That's if he sleeps with that intention, turns the sleep into a mitzvah. Well, what happens if he works for 40 years and his only intention is to be able to not work, to be able to play golf and shuffleboard? So that turns those 40 years into golf and shuffleboard. There's a reason why there is such a heavy stoner mentality in the Western world, of people who just drop out of life and they're high all day long. Because the Western culture does not promote industry. There used to be the idea of a work ethic, but that's long gone. Today, the idea is to make it, to hit it rich, win the lottery, and then never do anything again, and be batel. And so that's not just an issue of laziness. It's an issue of the fundamental value associated with industry. And the third area, which is dependency, it's hard for me to talk about how many different ways the Western culture celebrates the independent person, the self-made man, the idea of the person who doesn't need to ask anybody for anything. They take a person who has never asked anybody for anything. He negotiates, he bullies, he demands, he expects, but he never requests anything of anyone. He never says, could you please, with an understanding that he's then going to say, thank you, in appreciation, because he recognizes that he's a dependent being. Imagine taking such a person and making him the supreme head of America. Person who's never in his life asked anybody for anything. But it doesn't just stop with one person. It's a culture that says that the person who did it on his own is somehow better, is somehow the superior person. He's meant to be celebrated more so than anyone else. And so we have a culture that surrounds, a Western culture that celebrates the exact opposite of these three features: life, industry, and dependency. That means good, that's good news and bad news. The bad news is that it's very hard work to be able to affirm these basic values while against such a tidal wave of opposition. That's the bad news. The good news is that every little bit of awareness and celebration of life, industry, and dependency is leveraged as being extremely significant. It is far more significant than we could ever imagine because of the fact that there is so much resistance to those ideas. And I would like to just take it one step further, if I may. And that is that if you would take almost anything that a person wants to do, that he's having difficulty getting himself to do, I don't know, take going to the gym or exercising, whatever, physical fitness. And a person has made his New Year's resolutions over and over again that he's going to take care of himself physically. And his doctor has told him that he needs to take care of himself, and he agrees 100%. And he even signed up for the gym. Or he bought the exercise equipment that will soon become the hanging rack for many pairs of pants and towels and sheets. He bought the exercise equipment, he signed up for the gym. He wants to do this, but it repeatedly doesn't happen. And he thinks that that's a problem with his resolve. And so he makes a new resolution and a new resolution. The issue is, it's not a problem with resolve. Whenever a person confronts something that is difficult for them to do, something that is not just hard, but is somehow contrary to my nature, then he has to go back and check to see which one of these three things is weak. So let's give an example. It's very hard to know for any given person what it is that's getting in his way. Could be that he is indeed not a person who's very industrious, that he doesn't really believe that we're here to work. He doesn't really buy into Adam La'amal Yulad. It could be. It could be. I'm not in any way denying that that could be, but that's not the only possibility. What if the person is weak on dependency? What does dependency involve? Dependency involves the idea that I'm not an independent operator, I'm a dependent operator. What does that mean? That means that I need to accept that there is reality that is different than what I want. That's what dependency involves. It's an acceptance of reality. So if he doesn't accept reality, he doesn't believe that he really needs to exercise because he doesn't want to exercise. And so he doesn't believe, he thinks that he can somehow get by without exercising. How did he get that idea? Where did he have such a fantasy from? Why would a person have fantasy? The answer is that fantasy is the shortcoming of dependency because a person is not accepting reality. Reality always determines, when you see a little child building with their Legos and they're building taller and taller and taller, and you say, you look on it with a smile and you say, the kid is in a pitch battle with Newton. And guess what? Newton wins every time. And gets up to a certain point and the tower crashes down because that is part of reality. And the child in the process is learning that if he doesn't build it stronger and wider at the bottom, it will not stand that tall. And that's because he's becoming used to that I'm not an independent operator. And just because I fantasize about something that is so tall and stands with every single block in the house, but there's a reality that I need to deal with. Unfortunately, for many people, that stops with Legos. And they fantasize. What does fantasy lead to? Fantasy leads to anger. That's what causes anger. Anger means I really want to be independent, that everything that I want will happen. I fundamentally want to be an independent being. But unfortunately, something is getting in my way and not letting me be an independent being. And so whatever it is that's getting in my way, whether it's a person or some other aspect of reality, so it's not that I'm just unhappy with the fact that something didn't work out. I'm angry because I'm now being forced to confront the fact that I'm not independent. And that's the low tov. It's the only low tov in the Bria. Interestingly, everything else is not only tov, it's tov ma'od. Whether it's Chazal tell us, the Yetzer Hara, Malach HaMavis, Gehenna, it's not only tov, it's tov ma'od. Everything's wonderful. There's only one low tov in the Bria. And that low tov is for a person to feel that he's independent. It happens that the place where that dependency is given primary expression is by the person getting married. That's where the person formally acknowledges that I am not an independent operator. And that's why those two things are connected in the pasuk. When Hashem says, Lo tov hayosa adam levado, the response is, Ese lo ezer kenegdo, I will give him the structure whereby he can acknowledge that he is not an independent being. Questions, comments, reactions. If you want to ask a question, just be sure to unmute yourself so that you can ask. But I'm just going to summarize what we've said until now. We have three pillars. The pillars of life, industry, and dependency. Those three pillars they come from, or they will eventually become, Gemilut Chasadim, Torah, and Avodah. And they imply, first, a celebration of life. Second, a celebration of work, of industry, of toil. And third, a celebration of the fact that we are not independent operators. A celebration, we're supposed to celebrate that. We're supposed to be happy that we can ask somebody and that we can say thank you. We're supposed to be happy that we have needs. we're supposed to look forward to the fact that we are not independent operators. That's why we say a bracha, borei nefashos rabos v'chesrona. We thank Hashem for creating us as dependent beings. Well, why would you thank Hashem for that? The answer is that that's the only way that we can be human. We can't be human if we try to hold on to the fiction of being an independent operator. And so we thank Hashem for creating us with needs, which He can then address through our requests, through our tefillah. And so avoda is first and foremost an acknowledgement that I am a dependent being. And I'll just mention as an aside that recent events have been humbling for many parts of humanity because they have introduced the principle of vulnerability into the world. It's one of the reasons why they work so hard to try to beat this virus, because they don't like having vulnerability imposed on us. We don't like that. We don't want to have that. We want to be able to lay claim to independence. And that's why we fight against illnesses, and hospitals and researchers, and they fight against illnesses because that gives us a sense of vulnerability. But they don't fight against car accidents because that doesn't give them a sense of vulnerability. That's people. That doesn't give a sense of vulnerability. We understand that. Once we understand it, we don't care about it anymore. It no longer troubles us when we understand. And so these three not only are fundamental to humanity, but interestingly enough, when you find that somebody is struggling with any emotional difficulty as they go through life, you will invariably be able to track it back. I don't know if you can do it first day, but you will be able to track it back to a weakness in one of the three foundations. Something in one of the three foundations isn't yet clicking as being absolutely crucial. It's being, yeah, we subscribe to it, sort of, but it's not being held onto with this firm sense of celebration of life, industry, and dependency. Somewhere along the line, the person skipped over a step, and now they're trying to do something wonderful. They're trying to get up every day for davening at whatever, 6:30 in the morning, and they're having a terribly hard time getting up for davening. And you say, oh, I guess we need a better alarm clock. I guess we need somebody else to step in and wake them up. But likely that's not what's going on. Likely that something in the area of either industry or dependency has not yet been really grabbed onto. Something is weak in either the area of industry or dependency, probably in the area of dependency. For most people who go to shul today, and I don't want chas v'sholem to impugn anybody, but most people who go to shul today would be better off saying Tehillim, or, I don't know, learning some halacha, or maybe going to work, because they're not coming into shul in order to express their dependency. They're coming to shul to see how long it'll take before they don't feel guilty to leave. But if they're not coming to shul with the intent, I am going to shul in order to experience as fully as I can, to experience my dependency on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is a nachas ruach to Hashem. When we get in touch with our dependency, that's a source of nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is what enables us. He made the world. He made the world so that we would have opportunities to A, celebrate life, to B, celebrate industry, and C, to celebrate dependency. Questions, comments, reactions, alternative speeches? If not, yes, any questions at all?
I wanted to say that for even us women who might not go to shul, but when we get up in the morning and we daven, we too have to realize our dependency on Hashem.
Yeah.
And that's how we have to approach davening. And
It is easier for a woman.
Very good. I don't know about that.
Well, I'll tell
There's
you
too
why.
many distractions in the house, you know?
Yes.
There's a
But
lot
even-
of distractions.
Yeah, even without davening, though, a woman feels a sense of dependency, excuse me, feels a sense of dependency in a much more organic and natural way. I'm not saying that there aren't exceptions, but the idea of life, industry, and dependency, that's because women are perfect, right? So, but the idea that I am a dependent being is a little bit, it flows a little bit more naturally for a woman. It's a much bigger challenge for a man, especially because there's such a strong push to be the self-made person. But I appreciate the comment that women as well have to focus.
The only thing is that the dependency can be overwhelming. That's all. For a woman, she's dependent, let's say, on her husband, before that, her mother and father. So, you know, it can be overwhelming if the husband doesn't bring home the bread, then having everything that's necessary for the children. So it can be overwhelming because the children will come and kvetch to the mother before they'll kvetch to the father.
But the ability to embrace dependency is even when there is deficiency, even when there are things that we don't have, the ability to embrace dependency is a woman's challenge as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Wishing you well. And share b'saras tovos be'ezer Hashem.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rabbi Decker.
Thank you very much.
Amen. Thank you.
You're still there?